Back in 1978, we were told that a man could fly, and he helped inspire a lot of people in terms of what being a superhero is. Now, in the great year of 2025, can that slogan still hold true today? I mean, we went through a universe where a lot of people thought we would get that, and a lot of people were very divisive and very split on that. And now that that universe has come to an end, can we finally get something that could possibly be a little bit more optimistic? From what I've always been told about this character and how that was portrayed in that old universe, just do right by the fans, please, because then you'll get me to understand why people like this character. I guess maybe second time is the charm.
You have a dog?
Superman is directed and written by James Gunn. The film stars David Corenswet, Rachel Brosnahan, Nicholas Hoult, Eddie Gathegi, Anthony Carrigan, Nathan Fillion, and Isabela Merced. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, Superman must reconcile his alien Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing as Clark Kent. As the embodiment of truth, justice, and the human way, he soon finds himself in a world that views these as old-fashioned. Superman is considered one of, if not the most iconic superhero of all time. In terms of superheroes, most people would say, at least for three, okay, let's say top three superheroes, most people are going to say Batman and Spider-Man. Third would probably be Superman. There have been different variations of the character since his creation back in 1938. Whether it was through comics, movies, or shows, or even video games, regardless, Superman continues to be a hero for new generations. No matter what it is, Superman always finds a way to be something for everyone for each generation. Different forms of media does not matter. There is always a fan who of a new generation will always latch themselves onto that character. As for film slash TV versions, there have been many that have taken on the red, blue, and yellow outfit for decades upon decades. From Kurt Allen, who was the very first Superman, to George Reeves, to the iconic Christopher Reeve that most people usually look to as the gold standard of what Superman is supposed to be. That man embodied that character, and everyone to this day loves him. I actually watched his first movie for the first time. I'm hoping to watch maybe the second one, but I can see why people really fell in love with Superman, and it's all due to Christopher Reeve and his embodiment of the character. Tom Welling, who most people really appreciate and enjoyed watching when growing up when Smallville was out. Brandon Routh, who unfortunately had to kind of settle with trying to be a continuation of the Christopher Reeves and trying to be his own. It was a struggle for him with regards to playing the character, but thankfully he was able to come back during the CW era of DC shows. To the dark Henry Cavill, which was my first introduction to Superman, and yes, I know people will say that's a poor taste, but I'm just telling you, that was my first introduction to Superman, was through him. And then most recently, Tyler Hoechlin, who most people have really grown to appreciate and love and see as a really good representation of Superman. These actors brought the character to life in some form or way, whether you have a good or bad view of things. You cannot deny these are usually the ones that everyone tends to remember in terms of Superman on the big and small screen. After the recent failure of DCEU under Zack Snyder, and then of course I'll throw in Warner Brothers, because let's face it, this whole universe was a mess, not only from Zack Snyder's choices, but also Warner Brothers just quickly shambling just to make sure that this universe can stay afloat, or rather just follow every reception of each movie to the point of really just rushing and mulling every other project. James Gunn was brought in to help start and lead a new DC universe after the success of The Suicide Squad. Now, I will say success in the form of reception, because of course that movie did not do well, but then again, that was released during COVID, so it's one of those things of like, I don't know if I would say that it would be to blame for any sort of reason other than just during COVID. Due to that, and then of course Peacemaker Season 1, and then before this movie had come out, Creature Commandos, James Gunn was really trying to usher in a new era for the DC Universe, and hopefully trying to start a new one that hopefully comic book fans and newcomers can really enjoy and appreciate. A lot was riding on this. A lot for 2 years, this movie was really being propped up as hopefully the saving grace and hopefully DC's last attempt of actually trying to win over fans in terms of not just Superman, but just DC Comics as a whole for the big screen. But I'm happy to report that this movie was fun. I had a really great time. It was awesome to see a Superman that actually smiled and actually cared what he was doing. Nevertheless, I actually legit thought, besides those reasonings, James Gunn really put his hard work into it. Although there are a few issues, I'm not saying that there isn't. This made me actually like the character because ever since the DCU's version of Superman and that whole era of very dark versions of Superman, I'm not gonna lie, Henry Cavill's version, as much as he looks and can really seem like he can play the part with what Zack Snyder gave him and how Warner Bros. Screwed up this universe. That man was done dirty and he was ultimately cut short on hopefully potentially fully being the Superman that people probably wanted him to be. Instead, gave us a Superman that a lot of fans are even split to this day, although Zack Snyder cultist fans will latch onto it and say that that is the best version of Superman. Okay. But before getting into my problems with the film, here are the positives that I have with it. The performances are exciting. The cast, particularly Corenswet, Brosnahan, Hoult, and Gathegi, are all fun and effective, keeping up with their roles, how they are supposed to be. David Corenswet. This guy had to prove to a lot of people, especially not only as an unknown actor, relatively unknown, but also as an actor who can embody the character of Superman. Everyone has their own version, everyone has their own take on Superman. This guy had to prove why his Superman stood out amongst the other ones that have come before him. And thankfully, at the very least, while I was watching this movie, I never got a sense that this was Henry Cavill's version. Which I will say this, as much as I don't hate Henry Cavill, don't blame him. I'm kind of glad it wasn't him. And I do think that he does echo Christopher Reeves, but not to a point of being a mere copy. He feels more like a more down to earth, humble guy who grew up in Kansas and wanted to do good because of his upbringing. And not to say that the Christopher Reeve movies never did that. I'm just saying this movie brought it in a way where it actually felt like it's relevant more to today than it was back in 1978, and it's all due to Corenswet's performance. Rachel Brosnahan, I think, is really hard nailing and also very stubborn as Lois Lane, and as from what I've heard of the character and how she is supposed to be a very hard-hitting journalist, it makes sense, and she works it very well. I think her and David Corenswet, they have great chemistry throughout the movie, but I do think that she proves a really good effect to bring Superman down in terms of his views on things, and not to say that she doesn't view what he does as good, but as a journalist, she cannot show huge emotion. She has to be as neutral, or at the very least laying down the facts that our world kind of represents. Whereas the Superman, he's just only seeing the good in things, but she has to come in and pretty much tell him, like, look, I know you're wanting to do all these nice things, but you have to realize that there are actual legalities, issues by what you do. And Nicholas Hoult, very terrifying and very devilishly charming as Lex Luthor, is nowhere near, and I hate to be an asshole when I say this, but nowhere near what Jesse Eisenberg did with that character. I was told that that man was supposed to be a genius, and all I saw throughout that movie was the Riddler, okay? No. Here, Lex Luthor actually truly feels like an actual, genuinely scary foe to go up against. As much as Gene Hackman, who, rest in peace, think he did a very effective job of playing Lex Luthor opposite Christopher Reeve's Superman, I feel like Nicholas Hoult also does the same thing here in matching up with David Corenswet's Superman on a level where it felt like an actual antagonistic rivalry, and one that you see that Luthor is petty and jealous of the things Superman does. And for that, Nicholas Hoult knocks it out of the park. He made me actually really genuinely terrifying. Gathegi as Mr. Terrific, I don't know much about this character. Maybe somebody could tell me, but I think this character is a lot of fun and kind of a badass in his own way. The fact that he used these little orbs to take out enemies, the fact that he is pretty much a hacking genius and using those orbs to like locate people, It was a lot of fun. It was cool. I would love to see more of him if this universe keeps on continuing to grow and build, because I do think that he could be a really standout character for people, especially like me, who aren't familiar with the character, to fall in love with. The direction is excellent. Director James Gunn infuses his wacky, zany, and comic book knowledge style that helps bring Superman and the DCU to life, bringing it for newcomers, but mainly comic book fans. James Gunn has always been a director in the comic book world that I trust. I really think that this man truly understands the ins and outs of what a comic book movie is supposed to be, but also making sure that it is a little bit accessible for newcomers. Now, I will say that this movie is a little bit heavy, and I will get to my gripes a little bit, but I will give him credit. He does not make things confusing. He does not make it so grim and so disturbing. He fills it with joy, love, and passion that he has for this character, and he shows how much he really does find the DC universe to be interesting by introducing other characters that are existing in this world and introducing things that could later on be part of this massive universe. But I really think that James Gunn knows and has a style that really fits a tone of how to balance everything out with regards to making it so that way audiences can enjoy it, but that way comic book fans can also find themselves loving what he does every time he is doing a movie like this. The action is fun. Every sequence feels like a Saturday morning cartoon and comic book panel that keeps it engaging. The best part is that it's all in normal motion. It's not in that slow-mo bullshit that Zack Snyder was constantly doing. I hated it. It was so annoying. Thankfully, Gunn does not do that. And when he does do it, it's minor. It's not to a point of it's 20,000 times or every frame. He actually has the action sequences feel as kinetic and fluent as he can, as well as doing his signature thing of having a needle drop with music. Now, some people might find that annoying. I've always found it to be entertaining and actually refreshing, because a lot of times for me, I always don't think a music choice don't fit well with films, but thankfully James Gunn just knows how to craft not just action, but also how to incorporate music into sequences that I was always pleasantly surprised on every time. Even though I know those needle drops are coming, every time it hits, I should be annoyed by this, but god damn it, I'm really loving it. I can't deny that it was pretty cool. It was pretty awesome. So yeah, every action sequence in this movie was terrific and was a lot of fun. The cinematography is fluent. Cinematographer Henry Burham tightens on the flying characters and action of it all, feeling consistent all throughout the entire movie. How the flight sequences are, the fact that they try to mimic some of the jet flying motion that you would see in something like Top Gun Maverick, I thought was done pretty well, capturing Superman flying, as well as making sure that everything is always centered around the characters. It is never something is much bigger than these characters. These characters are the thing that are the biggest and the brightest. And also how the action is handled in terms of those fight sequences were really cool. They were really awesome, and it made us all really rooting for Superman every time he shows up. The music is epic. Composers John Murphy and Dave Fleming craft a score that suits and respects the character and his legacy alive, having a voice of its own. Every iteration of Superman has had an iconic song, but most people will say the one that everyone kind of flocks to this day is the John Williams score from the original Superman film from '78. I understand, because after watching that movie, I could see why it is iconic, because of how much John Williams emphasizes the heroic nature of Superman. But here, John Murphy and David Fleming, not only do they take cues from that, because of course they do take little motifs and bits from the John Williams score, but they craft a score for the entire film that feels like it has an identity of its own. It has a vibe, it has a tone that it wants to go for, and they clearly wanted Superman to stand out amongst the other Superman versions that have been. Production is incredible. Seeing the costumes, props, and sets and crew work shows the dedication, passion, and love for the character as a whole, having the hard work pay off in the end. There's one thing I always like seeing, is that when you see the amount of dedication that it took to making sure that this comic book movie can be brought to life, but not in a way where it feels like it has been rushed or have been kind of going through the grinding process of just wanting to get this out there. It felt like James Gunn and co took their time and effort in making sure that everything felt made and was right, and knowing that this movie was generally made out of passion and love for Superman as a whole, and the universe of the DCU. And that is, I think, the coolest part, seeing how much of that work was paid off because of how amazing this movie looks. The story is interesting. Seeing Superman fight Lex Luthor and struggle with his responsibilities made it fascinating and great, bringing the emotions and excitement. I had a problem with how Superman was in the Snyder version because I have always been told of what Superman is, and when I saw that film, I got a story that could have worked if it had, not been depressing as all hell, or at the very least, not doing what Superman doesn't really do a lot in media, or if so, was done poorly. This time around, we have a film that very much feels like back to basics of what people like about Superman and Lex Luthor, their dynamic in the film, and Superman's dynamic with Lois Lane and with Ma and Pa Kent, and the Justice Gang that Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, and Hawker are part of. There are a lot of cool things to see in this movie, and how much that James Gunn really wants people to know how well established this is, and how much that this feels like its own thing, feels like a connective universe that could lead to really bigger things. But it was just nice having a Superman that actually felt like a genuine character I can root for. The effects are stunning. Both the practical and visual effects look amazing. It does well with blending it all together. There is a mixture of visual effects, whether it be on Crypto the dog, or just explosions, or creature designs. I will say it was amazing to see a lot of practicality, especially on really the Superman bots that you see at the Fortress of Solitude. I thought that was cool. I thought they did a really good job of blending both of those two elements of visual and practical effects together to make it feel as fluent as it can. And it was really stunning to see a comic book movie actually have effects that, looked finished, or at the very least, to the point of it was always intended to look like this or play out like it, how it was. It's a fun time, but there are a few issues that were there that I couldn't ignore. As much as I want to love this movie even further, there are some things that I had to take away from, think about, and actually realize while I was making this review. So here are now the negatives. The writing is all over. While Gunn does bring his style, sometimes it doesn't land and can feel messy, having it feel chaotic in that way. I always appreciate James Gunn writing. I really do. But I feel like with this movie, it seems like he threw in a lot of things in here that, while I do understand and appreciate his love and dedication to Superman and how much he is a comic book fan through and through, I do think that, though, there are times where he has to over explain things or quickly simplify things so that way it can just move on. And while I do appreciate for audiences who aren't new to the DC universe, or at the very least don't understand comic book logic or reasonings, at the same time it does get to a point of it does feel like it's explaining a lot and doing a lot of it rather than showcasing it, or rather just feeling like they have to really like have the audience catch up a lot of the times, and it seems like that the audience is running and trying to catch every time, but every time they do, it's almost like more information comes out, and it's like, okay, well, hold on, let me understand this information first. So it's a very heavy-handed film, and it also feels totally sometimes inconsistent, whether it wants to be sometimes funny, sometimes emotional, and sometimes really straight to the point. It can bounce a lot back and forth, and while I do love the humor, it, like I said, can vary when the tone of it can feel back and forth a lot of the times. The subplots are a lot. The film can feel overstuffed with many side stories and ideas that can be too much. Overall, it can pretty much feel bloated to a lot of people. There is a lot going on in this movie that some of the subplots do feel like, as much as I appreciate that, at the same time, could there have been things that could have been, left out, or at the very least, like, kind of saved for later on? Yeah, maybe, but I will say it did feel like a good amount of the time that it was so much to handle, and it is a lot. It is very much wearing its comic book roots, or at the very least, its comic book feels all throughout. And while I love that, and I think that I appreciate a comic book movie doing that, at the same time, it can be heavy-handed. It can be very much, especially with those side stories, whether it be the whole Daily Planet stuff, or the plans that Lex Luthor has, or rather this storyline that is supposed to represent the whole Israel-Gaza conflict, which I do think is really interesting. It's a lot. It can be very much overwhelming to handle so much of that. By the end, it was a blast and put a big smile on my face. Gunn proved that he is a comic book fan through and through. Though the issues are there, it's a success overall. I'm just happy that I can now finally understand people who love Superman and appreciate him. And I wouldn't mind looking at some Superman shows that people have been really enjoying, or at the very least, really appreciating, because I now understand it. Because it took this movie to really do that, because I always found Superman to be boring. I do respect that Gunn was able to downgrade him in a way where I was kind of rooting for him and really hoping that I can have a Superman that I can look up to, or bring a level of humanity that was sorely lacking when Henry Cavill was playing the character. But thankfully, David Corenswet, he delivered that also well. I am going to give Superman an 8 out of 10. This is a great comic book movie. If you want something that you can at least enjoy, especially now at the theater, this would be the time to do so. I know people are looking forward to Fantastic Four, and I am hoping that that movie also turns out well. But if you want a good Superman movie, or just a good comic book movie, I highly recommend this one. If you do. Again, I understand everyone can feel comic book burnt out, but I respect James Gunn a lot, that I just want him to succeed, and at the very least have a universe for him to craft and make, and have other new voices come in and have their saying and their views of the characters in his universe that he's allowing for people to do. So for James Gunn, really happy for him. Soon I will be doing a review for Eddington. So yes, look forward to that review and other reviews coming soon.